environment that we have today. We set materials ahead of time, so if there's any questions, we have time for that. Consumption and waste, Catherine from our current team is going to talk about that, and then Danny on his way from Parks is going to talk about natural environment and then what we have to come from there. So for those of you that are joining online, I left a slide up that we're going to go do a quick tour of the watershed area, and then we'll be back in about 15-ish minutes. So Greg, that's your ping that we're all going to get up and go do a quick tour really quick, and then we'll come back into this classroom. There's restrooms right around the corner and a water fill station right as well, if you need anything.
So before we get too deep into it, so the watershed just grand reopened, so you're one of the few first people to see it. Next week on Earth Day, they are having an industry night. The information's behind Lindsay over there, and all of you are invited to come to that. There will be other sustainability climate professionals, and we'll be getting feedback on the watershed strategic plan, on the climate priorities. There'll be food and drinks, and so you're welcome to come to that. So write that down on your calendar if you are interested.
And I'll send it in our notes too afterwards.
Okay. The exhibits are very much like go with what you feel. It's independent, and so I'll be walking around if you have any questions, but we're just going to set you loose like a group of 5th graders. So check it out, interact with the activities. If you have any questions, let me know, but otherwise we'll just go out there for like 15 minutes now. Is that what we have?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, come on.
Give a time that is 4:15 or 4:30.
25.
Yeah, just because we got started doing this.
Okay. Yep, 4:25.
Okay.
Great. Did another round.
Yeah, it's some of the new stuff's rad.
Good.
Guys, I really want to go see Bernie, but I don't think I can do the traffic.
Now, what time does it start today?
I think 6,
Okay.
dude. I don't know.
Maybe we'll fast and we can.
I
get people
know.
out there.
Well,
Hello again.
how's it going?
How are you?
I'm good. You were at the climate thing.
Yeah.
Were you in my talk?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was just telling Lindsay how my daughter was sick, and I was like, from your perspective, was I like on time?
Yeah.
Like perfect.
Shortly. Not like me right now.
You just made it, yeah.
Well, I have school and no one else here has school, so
What's your first name?
I'm Ella.
That's right, Ellen. You guys email.
Yes.
So I talked to Martha. We're doing this watering thing on Polecat, and I'm gonna see if Martha will connect with you guys and like you'll do observations, but it won't be until like July.
That's
Are you
fine.
guys around this summer?
Yeah, I'm around all summer. I work at ICL,
Yeah,
but I do
just
like
saw
20
Lana.
hours a week, so.
Good to see. I saw Lana and who was she? Megan. Is it Megan? No. Allison? I don't know.
Rachel?
It's Rachel.
Yeah.
Brown hair. Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
I just saw them. Just saw them. They're great. They're doing a tour of the this. So if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Yeah, I've tried this. Just like a 3rd time here, but yeah. Okay.
They might have a name tag there too.
Yeah, Ella.
I do have a name tag.
I'm glad it looked normal from your perspective because it was the.
I wouldn't have noticed you were late. Like we didn't notice you were late.
It's good. I felt it. I wanted to get there. But to you, it just looked like I walked in with a red face and grabbed the mic and started talking.
You didn't even look red. I wouldn't have known you were disheveled unless you.
Oh man, I was very disheveled, but we made it.
Yeah, I modeled it.
Okay. I guess it's best not to admit, right?
Yeah.
What was your first name?
Catherine.
Catherine.
Yes, I'll be going over the materials, management and consumption section, so I'm just reviewing my slides real
Oh,
quick while
yeah.
everybody's
Hit it,
going
hit it.
through the watershed.
It was pajama day at school,
Yeah.
so I was in a full pajama suit, but I had to change the clothes to match what my pajamas.
It's a good move. Hopefully not when you were moving down the road.
No, definitely not.
It's just not too I'm like just. It's okay.
Hey, how are you?
Very good.
Doing okay. Just going over my slides one more time, make sure that down, so I'm sure that I will get up there and all the ideas in my head, I'll probably retain about 5% of those, so.
Let's have a tendency to happen.
Yeah.
Are all the slides in here?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not your week.
Yeah, I usually take Mondays off.
Oh,
I worked today, just so like, it's the day off. We're planning we usually do a big, our neighbors usually put on a big Easter egg hunt in the park, because we live right backed up to. And so they usually do a big one. Their kids are getting older, and so they pass it on to us. This way.
Oh, lucky you.
Like, so,
Nobody saw it.
Okay. It's me and Chelsea and
It's a super fun. Mostly.
They have-
it's like, so,
what do you do, Kayla?
I'm on the development team at the Idaho Conservation League.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I just saw Lana and great.
Yeah.
They run it, they're all together.
They're the two that go and do a lot of things out there.
It was a set line.
Is there anything you don't know?
Yeah, yeah. No, I did like a hiker. Well, I know everything guys.
It's like amazing. Can you go to the actual treatment?
Yeah, no, last year I gave a couple
I
of
think
like
they
hiker
do.
presentations, you guys would go over.
Like you can go with one.
So I did my masters, I did. Hikers, they had me come in.
Okay, I think everybody's back. I know we have one, who's joining online today.
Well, yeah, my page.
Does anyone have questions about the information that we sent ahead of time? So there was the map that you could come play around with, it was from Danny, and then Catherine sent some of our data. Any questions or thoughts or comments? Yeah.
You and I had the same question. What's with the orange bag decline?
Yeah.
Sure, that is a good question. So, just to give a little background on the Orange Bag program, in case anybody's new to Boise or is not familiar with the program. So it's a recycling program that is optional for residents to participate in for your hard to recycle plastics. So things that traditionally can't go into your blue bin, things like your styrofoam or your flimsy plastic, chip bags, things that we want to make sure that do not go loose to our material recovery facility. The program started around 2018 when China enacted the green sword policy, where they set really high standards on what can be brought into their country to be recycled. And so communities across the country scrambled because they had high contamination rates. Some sorts of materials could no longer be accepted. So in Boise, our leaders on the Curbit team decided to pivot and offer this voluntary program, the Orange Bag program. And to get people to participate in the program, the first year, which was in 2018, they sent everybody a starter kit, and everybody got free bags that they could start participating, getting used to the program. The second year, as you can see in 2019, there was a jump because people were participating, they were using their bags. A voucher was also sent out that year, and so more people were going out to the stores and buying the bags. And then over time, we decided that was a good way to get people introduced to the program, but the city was not going to provide any additional starter kits or vouchers. And so there's a natural decline in people choosing not to use the program. Maybe it doesn't fit their lifestyle. Maybe they don't want to take the time to sort their materials into their orange bags, or maybe they want to reduce their plastic use overall. So that was a long answer, but basically now that it is up to the consumer to decide whether or not they want to participate, we've just seen a decline in the number of residents that are taking advantage. So
Are there any reminders or anything that's kind of like, what's the messaging system around orange bags?
that's a good question. We do have information on our Curbit website. We do link to Hefty Renew. They're the program managers. We link to their website that has information about what can go in the bags, life cycle assessments that's ranking different ways that the materials are processed and the environmental impacts associated with that. We'll do social media posts occasionally. We'll have information in our In the Know newsletter. When we do go to outreach events, we will have some little samples of orange bags that people can take home if they're new to the program and they want to try it out, along with some flyers. So we have a number of different strategies, but Yeah, go ahead.
But, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it also true that now we can put a lot more plastics in the regular blue recycling bin?
Yes.
So the importance of the orange bags has decreased quite a bit.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's absolutely true.
most of the plastics in my own house
Yeah.
is, I think we can put in the blue now.
Yeah, that's correct. So you can now put your number 1 and number 2 bottles, jars, and jugs in your recycling, along with your number 5 yogurt tubs, any type of food tub, like a sour cream tub. So people are putting more of those items into their blue carts, which is great. There are also other ways that you can recycle flimsy plastics. You can take them back to the grocery store, for example, instead of using them in the orange bag. So yeah, there is another reason why there could be a drop is that there are just more materials that are accepted in our blue bins loose or through other recycling programs. A good question. There are always orange bag questions, so.
And Catherine put some flyers up front with all of the sorting instructions as well as on grab. Yeah.
Basics.
And it's, I think the website is a really good resource too, like it has down to individual items listed.
You can type in an item too, it tells you what goes where, also some resources on how to maybe swap an item, swap something that's single use for something that's reusable, or how to choose an alternative. So we have some reduce and reuse options in there too.
I will say it seems like there's a PR issue around it though too. I mean, when I moved here, my neighbors were like, oh, you did that? Like, that just gets thrown out. And this is like including people who work like for city agencies and stuff, like, yeah, it gets tossed. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna keep doing it because I hope it doesn't, but, so I don't know, maybe that's part of the thing, like, here's examples of how it's been used, effectively.
Yeah.
We've made X, Y, and Z out of the plastics that were recycled there.
Yeah, I will say we've heard that in some of our community conversations. I think almost every single one of them, people have said, don't those just get shipped to Salt Lake and burned for fuel or
Right.
whatever? And every time we've kind of debunked the myth, so clarifying some messaging from the city is probably a good recommendation. Yeah.
My school has a bench made out of orange.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Cut it out, that's the thing
Yeah.
they've been used for.
We always say that example and I'm always like, what park is it at again? And none of us can remember exactly where it is. So what school do you go to again?
I go to Riverstone.
Okay, yeah.
I think the commercial waste is insane, and I know it's something that, I remember trying to work on this like 30 years ago in Boise. So I'm curious, like, what's the movement on that? Cause that's like, overall, right, if I read that right, it's more than what the residential, like the total output is anyway, right? So yeah, what's the skinny on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Can I tuck a question on that?
Sure, yeah.
Just like a statistical question, was the commercial like, so it was like a single family house or whatever, right, for the residential? But the commercial, I was like, oh, this is like an address for like, say, a yoga studio versus maybe some major crazy manufacturing place that has a huge.
Right, so our residential, that's a great question to kind of clarify and to make sure when we talk about residential and commercial, we all know what we're talking about. So residential waste, that is coming from single family homes, duplexes, and triplexes. That's your traditional 3-bin trash recycling compost that you'll find outside of most homes. The commercial sector, that includes businesses, organizations, industry, and any multifamily property with 4 or more units. So there's a vast difference in all the different types of accounts that could be in the commercial sector versus, say, the residential sector. There could be some differences in our own home trash, compost, recycle bins, but it's generally pretty homogeneous. Compared to the commercial sector, we could be talking about Micron's waste, or we could be talking about local mom and pop coffee shops waste. And so there are fewer accounts in our commercial sector, but they are generating much more waste. And so I think it's something like last year, about 63% of all of the trash that went to the landfill was from our commercial sector. And so it's definitely an area that we want to tackle, and we do have some programs dedicated to the commercial sector specifically, but because it is such a diverse sector, we're trying to create programs that are a little bit more tailored to different entities within that commercial sector. So for example, multifamily outreach is going to look much different than, say, restaurant industry outreach versus Micron outreach, So we'll talk a little bit more about in my presentation of some of the ways that we're doing that.
Also, 2.6% of the total waste stream being pet waste. That was a shocker.
Yeah. so that's a good comment too on that waste stream analysis that is analyzing the waste that is going to our landfill. You're right, there are some really surprising things that come out of that. I think some of those subcategories are really interesting. And then kind of taking a big step back when we look at that waste stream analysis, it's interesting to see that a lot of that waste that's going to the landfill could potentially be diverted. I can take a look right here, and I think it's something like 20% of the material that's going to the landfill is organic waste. That could be composted, that could be processed with anaerobic digestion. There's a lot of wood and C&D waste too that has the potential to be recycled. So I think, yeah, like you said, it's so interesting, these little tiny things, like I saw diapers on there, I was like, what? That's so crazy, that's wild. But then taking that big picture perspective of there's a lot of opportunities for ways we can divert this waste that's currently going to the landfill. Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
So you'll be addressing some of those things in your presentation, just, okay, I'll hold on.
Definitely. And definitely available for questions afterwards too. As a fellow data nerd, if anybody wants to go through it with me, I am happy to. So I just wanted to provide you all this data before the presentation, just to give kind of a general overview of the waste systems in Boise. So as we're going through the climate actions you can take, you have a little bit of context.
Okay, I'm gonna let Catherine take one from here. Feel free to ask questions as she's going through too.
Oh, and also, did anybody have any map the canopy questions? I didn't want to leave Danny and natural environments out too, so.
Cool.
Maybe we can touch on that more. Okay, so to give you a brief agenda of what I'll be going over, first I'll talk a little bit about the relationship between consumption, waste, and sustainable materials management. Then I'll use what's called the waste management hierarchy, which is something that the EPA has produced, which is how we can manage our materials most effectively. And then use that hierarchy as a framework to talk about individual actions that you all can take in your homes, at work, to lessen your climate impact related to waste and consumption. So the big question is, how do those two things relate? As you all are aware, I'm sure that there are a lot of greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the entire material life cycle, not just the end of life. We're talking about the natural resources and energy that goes into making products, and the transportation of those products, the use of those products, and the disposal. And so in our climate action roadmap, we've identified some targets on how we can reduce the impact of those greenhouse gas emissions throughout the entire materials management life cycle. And so sustainable materials management is just a way that we can create some boundaries around using and reusing our materials the most productively throughout their entire life. So in the city of Boise, we practice sustainable materials management through our CURBIT programs. You can see a few examples of residential CURBIT programs on this slide, everything from your 3-bin system outside your house to our glass recycling drop-off sites. Household hazardous waste is underneath the zoom right there, orange bag. And then we also encourage people to think about the upstream impacts of their waste. So not just how do we dispose of an item, but how can we make it so that we're not creating that waste in the first place through fixing our items, repairing them, reusing them, and preventing them from ending up in the waste stream. And as we talked about, the commercial sector is a large source of waste in Boise, but it's a little bit more challenging to tackle just because every business is so diverse in the materials that they produce and that they are generating and ultimately disposing. But we are trying to increase our outreach through a number of different strategies. For example, when an organization submits a building or planning permit in Boise, we check out their solid waste plans to make sure that solid waste is accounted for, that the trash and recycling can be picked up in an effective manner, that there's space for recycling, for example. Same with demolition permits. We ask that when a demolition permit is submitted, that people talk about how their waste is going to be handled at the end of life, and then be able to notify salvage companies so that material can be reused instead of going to the landfill. We also work with individual businesses to conduct waste evaluations, where we go into the organization and we provide tailored recommendations on ways that they can reduce their waste, divert their waste. We just went to BSU, for example, and took a look at their student union building and ways that they can improve their waste management practices. And then an exciting new program that we just started is called the Curbit Awards. So we want to really honor and recognize those organizations, schools, businesses that are leading in the areas of waste reduction. And so the Curbit Awards, we have granted 3 different organizations these awards so far. They submit an application of how they're reducing their waste, and then we will analyze their results. And then if we see that they've met certain criteria, they will get an award. So you could visit Common Grounds Market off of Eustic. They are one of our first Curbit awardees. St. Luke's today just got awarded their Curbit Award, and Charlie's Produce, which is a produce manufacturer in Boise, and they're doing some really great things around food waste prevention. So we hope to spread the word about that program. So if you know the local business that's making some strides in this area, definitely apply. There's some information on the final slide about how you can find that information. Okay, so raise your hand if you've heard of the 3 R's, the reduce, reuse, recycle. Yeah, pretty much everybody, right? That is based off of the EPA's waste management hierarchy. So this is not a pyramid scheme, I promise. It is just a way of thinking about how to handle our materials, from the most environmentally preferred up at the top to the least environmentally preferred down at the bottom. So when you hear the words reduce, reuse, recycle, really the order of those words is important. Reducing the amount of waste that we produce in the first place and reusing our materials, that's the most impactful way to handle them, because we're not using the energy and resources needed to get them from point A to point B. So we've developed a reduce and reuse program to encourage people to do that. There's a question. Oh, yeah.
I just want to make a plug. The hierarchy actually is rethink if you need that item to begin with.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. Yeah, do I even need this? For sure. And if an item cannot be prevented from becoming waste or cannot be reused, we move down to our recycling systems. And so this is taking what would be a waste item and converting it into something new through either a physical, biological, or chemical process. And as I'm going through these 2, I'll show you how they align with the different Curbit programs. So in that recycling and composting tier, we have our mixed recycling program, glass recycling, compost, which is basically recycling our organic waste. We have our household hazardous waste program, where a lot of the materials that we want to make sure do not go to the landfill can be recycled properly or even reused in some ways. And then everybody's favorite, energy recovery in the orange bag program. Energy recovery, and this is sort of a simple definition of it, but it's taking a waste material and using it as an energy source instead of an alternative. So for example, with the orange bag program, about half of the materials from the bags go to a cement manufacturing plant. Instead of using coal as a fuel source, the orange bags are used as a fuel source. So orange bag is sort of a quasi energy recovery and recycling, because the other 50% of the materials from the orange bag go to different recycling projects. And then finally, if we can't reduce, reuse, or recycle, we need to somehow dispose of our items. And the most common way that we do that here in Boise is by sending it to our waste to the landfill. And the landfill is not evil. The landfill does have a very important purpose in our community, and it is highly engineered. Of course, we want to reduce the amount of waste we send to the landfill, but there are some things that do belong there. So now, through the next few slides, I'm going to take this waste management hierarchy, and for each of those tiers, talk about actions that individuals can take to reduce their climate impact within that layer of the hierarchy. So, starting with reduce and reuse, what can you do? We'll describe what you can do as sort of a baseline. What are some good actions that you can take to reduce and reuse your waste? Sort of the next step level will be the better options, and then best. This is really pie in the sky, things that we can strive to achieve. And I will note too that based on the context of what we're talking about, the material we're talking about, the actions might sort of shift from good down to best. But in general, this is sort of how our thinking should be framed. And I am sure there are many actions on here that are not listed on the presentation that I would highly encourage you after the presentation to contact our team so that we can add these in as alternative suggestions for ways that people can handle their materials. So in the reduce and reuse section, buying durable quality items, if you do need to purchase something new, which we all need to do sometimes, if you can buy something that can last for a long time, that extends the life cycle of the item, using it more, less likely that you will be purchasing alternative substitute items. Choosing products with less or no packaging reduces the amount of waste that is surrounding the item. And then, if possible, swapping your disposable items for reusables. I see a lot of water bottles out there on the table, so I'm happy to see that. That's an example of how you can swap those things. Next, instead of buying new, we can support our local reuse economy. We're really lucky in Boise to have a lot of awesome secondhand shops, everything from, we were talking about the Reuseum earlier, to the craft market, to our vintage shops and our secondhand stores. Borrowing and renting is also a great alternative to buying new. Plus, it can save you a little bit of money. Other people can use those items after you're done with the items. And then let's say you do have an item and you don't need it anymore. You can use Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or however you want to try to resell those unwanted items or donate them responsibly. And then I really like what you were saying earlier about thinking about if you even need the item in the first place. When you're going to buy something, when you go down the grocery store aisle, that little aisle of all the trinkets right before you get to the cash register, that's called the impulse buy section for a reason. Like people, we live in a very highly consumer-based society where more is sort of the ethos. And so just taking a pause to think about if you really need that item or not can help you in thinking about how to reduce your waste. Also, using items you already have on hand, whether that's through mending your clothes or repairing, or taking your items to a repair shop so they can be fixed instead of thrown away. Those are some alternatives to putting them in a landfill or through our diversion programs. All right, so reduce and reuse is that top layer of the waste management hierarchy. Now we'll go through some of our recycling programs, starting with compost. So if you all have a compost cart at your house, the best thing you can do is to use it. We recently expanded what can be put in the compost cart. So now you can put meat, bones, dairy into your compost cart. Basically anything you can eat can go in your compost cart now. And to also use compost. We have a give back site just right down the road on Joplin where you can pick up free compost. There's also one at the Idaho Botanical Garden. And we also have a program called the Community Compost Give Back where you can order compost for your entire neighborhood. 25 yards of compost will be delivered to you and your neighbors can all share it. Even better, you can try your hand at backyard composting. That's the most hyper-local thing that you can do around your food and yard waste, trying to compost it at home. And then spreading the word about our food scrap drop-off program for multifamily residents. We just expanded our compost program to include folks who are living in apartments, whereas before they did not have access to our compost program. Now they do by going to one of our food scrap drop-off sites. It's totally free and we want to get more and more people using it. So the more people are diverting their food waste from different household types, the more that we can reduce that impact from our organic waste from our residents. And then the best thing, oh, did I hear a question? Yeah.
So was there a difference in your process at the city level in terms of being able to take grease oils and other stuff with I'm just curious to know. We're not having to do a deep dive on your process.
Oh, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What has changed in your process for the city compost, the green carts that you can take grease, meats, and other things that normally weren't?
That's a great question. So it actually had to do with our state permit. The Department of Environmental Quality, when we first applied to have a compost facility in Boise, it was, I think, the first residential compost facility in the state of Idaho. And so there was some hesitation, wanting to make sure that everything was handled properly, wanting to reduce any sort of risk of odors or pests. And so it was decided upon that initial permit that only vegetative food scraps and yard waste could be in the compost system. We, I think about a year ago, started the process of asking DEQ if we could include more types of waste. And so we worked with the state agency and the Central District Health to update those standards. And it was just a matter of getting that permit updated and communicating to the community.
So your internal heat process is enough to degraded, obviously.
It is, yeah, at our compost facility, the temperatures at the site, I wish I had a picture, it's so cool. But those temperatures get up to 140 to 160 degrees, so it does kill off a lot of pathogens, bacteria. And so we were able to handle it, we just, by permitting, we're not able to process it. Yeah, good question. And then, final thing, best thing, this is kind of a trend you'll see through the next slides, but if we can not create that waste in the first place, whether that's in your home kitchens, how you're grocery shopping, how you're meal planning, loving your leftovers to prevent that waste from becoming organic waste in the first place, or different types of lawn care techniques. You know, you can get a mulching lawn mower in order to integrate the organic waste back into your soils. Ways that we don't have to be putting more waste into our compost gardens. Okay, in terms of general recycling, what we kind of think of when we talk about recycling, the best thing, or starting out, one of the things that you can do is to sort the items in your blue bin correctly. So we do have information here through our basics guide, as well as on our websites about what can and can't go in your recycling cart. But we also have a lot of other great recycling programs. We have our glass drop-off sites. Folks can participate in the orange bag program if they choose. Household hazardous waste is another excellent program that people can take part in. And we want to avoid wish cycling. Has anybody ever heard of that term before? Yeah.
What is it?
Wish cycling. So it's when you're at home and you're kind of making that decision between, do I put this in the trash or do I put this in the recycling? It's not just saying, oh, fingers crossed, I'm going to toss it in my recycling and hope that it gets recycled. If you are in doubt of an item being recyclable or not recyclable, you should probably throw it out, because contamination at our material recovery facility can jam up the process, take more time to process, and it's more expensive for our recovery facility to handle contamination. So next, if you are at the grocery store and you're deciding between two items, choosing the item that is made out of recyclable materials is preferred. And then the best thing, similar to the compost slide and to our reduce and reuse slide, if we cannot create the recyclable waste in the first place, that's the hardest to do, for sure. And there are some barriers to that, and we'll talk about that in our activity that we'll be doing. But that is the best way that we can handle it, by not having to process it at the end of its life.
Got a question for you,
Yeah.
composting.
Yeah.
Now that you can compost meats and fats and so on.
Yeah.
Do you have direction or guidance, like what you can put that in? Because if you just put it into your bin, you're gonna have a long-term smelling issue.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We do have some, my compost program lead colleague, she can answer this the best, but I'll take a stab at it. You can try putting your food waste into a paper bag, because the paper can technically be composted. That kind of contains the waste a little bit.
Yeah, that's what we're currently, but once you get into more liquids,
Definitely.
or if there's any thought or design options for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that we do encourage folks that if it's during the time of year where you have your grass clippings or your leaf clippings, having that carbon material really helps soak up some of that. But there are going to be times a year where we don't have those available. So some people, you can tear up some newspaper and kind of stick it into your compost cart to soak up some of the liquids and the odors. We also recognize that sometimes carts may have to be swapped, and so you can request that a cart be swapped through the city programs. Republic will come out and give a clean cart. We're definitely in the learning phase. Since we haven't done this before, we're trying to figure out, what are some good and affordable too strategies for people to not have those odors or potential rats for people. So, so I didn't say that.
Lisa had mentioned keeping a pile of leaves like next to your compost bin too throughout the year, so you can put some leaves down and then put your food in and layer it like that to try to
So the approach I've been taking about it is wondering if there's specific guidance or even thought of specific container type designs that you can use.
Yeah, I know we have some more resources on our website. Maybe at the end of the presentation, I'll look real quick and see if I can get the answer for you.
And they say to put the bin out every week, even if there's not very much in it, just to kind of avoid that smell.
So, kind of a related question, and ties to us being here in the water facility.
Yeah.
Now that we have more options with the composting, of course, historically, a lot of people kept stuff out of the landfill by grinding it up in the garbage disposal and just putting it down the drain.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you would say it's better to put it in the compost bin,
Yes.
but what's the decision process? I mean, how should I explain that to family and friends?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, it sounds like just flushing it down the sink is keeping it,
Yeah.
out of the system too.
Yeah, that's true, yeah,
So-
yeah,
How do I
definitely, I think there,
articulate that to people?
for sure, I think there are a few things that you can explain to folks. One that I think is really neat is that waste that you're putting into your compost cart is actually being made into something really beautiful that we can use in our community. It's making compost, it's rejuvenating our soils, we can apply it, and it's providing a benefit in our circular economy. I bet that the watershed staff could answer this question a lot better than I could from the like wastewater treatment facility perspective. But I do know that some of the food can gum up the systems. Again, I'm saying this in not a very technical terms, but especially fats, oils, and grease can really jam up our processes here, and they require more energy to process when things go through your drain versus if they were to be in your compost cart.
Yeah, on that wastewater plant, I mean, that organic load is a huge another factor in terms of energy consumption processes. I mean, so it's not just the jam up, it's adding to the energy costs of treating that, because you're treating something that you don't have to treat. It's just, the organic and hydraulic load combines and creates issues. We got rid of our garbage disposal like 30 years ago, and people think we're weird, but
I was just gonna say something along the same lines, but if you look at it just from a carbon perspective, right, if you flush it down into our waste stream, that's going into the wastewater treatment plant, it takes more carbon, right, to treat that, because it's more labor intensive. Whereas if we make compost out of it, we're putting that compost, incorporating that compost back into soils, that's actually like sequestering more carbon, adding more carbon to our soils, so just from a carbon standpoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had a question about recycling.
Sure.
I think earlier you mentioned that there are like policies being implemented to help apartment complexes include recycling, and I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure.
My last 3 property management have been like, no recycling allowed in this complex, so.
Yeah. Awesome question, definitely. So a little bit to what I was saying at the beginning about our solid waste design standards. So when we have new properties coming in, we do require that they have enough space to allow for a recycle bin. It's not going to necessarily make it 100% so that they'll include a recycle dumpster or recycle carts, but it's more required in the infrastructure that they at least make it available. We don't have any rules right now that are requiring multifamily property owners to provide recycling for their residents, but that is something that we learned in our community engagement survey about solid waste management. People would like to see that happen, and so we're considering what that would look like, if that's possible, how would we regulate that? So it's definitely an interest in our community. In the meantime, we're trying to provide some services to our multifamily property owners. How can you include recycling at your facility, and showing that it's even more affordable to include recycling at your facility, for example. And then also giving multifamily residents alternative ways to recycle their items if they don't have recycling at their homes. So talking about how you can drop off your recycling. It's not as convenient, but it is an option. And do we need to increase the number of drop-offs, for example? Or are there ways that you can, talk to your apartment manager about getting recycling in there? We have a memo on our website that is sort of a template that residents can use to send to their property managers and say, hey, here are the benefits of recycling, here are the cost savings, we'd really like to see this. So trying some strategies to incentivize right now, and then seeing if down the line there could be some more sort of policy-based solutions to that. Yeah, a good question. Yeah, definitely something we want to work on. Any other questions? Before we go on to trash? So our trash cans are useful for a lot of things, and there are things that belong in the trash, and there are things that certainly don't belong in the trash. Frederick and I were talking about lithium-ion batteries earlier and how important it is to recycle those versus putting them into our trash carts. They can cause truck fires, unfortunately, so we want to make sure that the things that belong in the trash go to the trash, the things that need to be handled in a different way are handled as such. And then keeping our carts clean, bagging up your trash, keeping your cart lid closed. One way that you can learn a little bit more about how much waste your household is creating is to conduct an at-home waste audit, which we'll do a little bit in the activity coming up later. And then again, not creating the trash in the first place is the best solution.
I have a quick question. So, in the new recycling of food rules, you can include oils, butters, fats,
Yes.
solid fats, all that stuff could go in the stuff that goes in the green bin?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
I have a quick question too. Lately I've been seeing so many of the like plug-in or like rechargeable vapes, like just on the ground.
Yeah.
We'll like pick them up, but I'm like, I don't think we can just throw this away. Is there like a spot?
I should have brought them to my. We had people bringing us vapes.
Okay, because I just have a pile at my house now and I like don't know what to do with them.
Great question. So you could take it to a Rotary Club to have them recycled, or our household hazardous waste facility at the
Okay,
landfill.
that's great.
Yeah, great question.
And there's something in there that's rechargeable, lithium-ion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what it's called.
Yeah, sure, that's-
Yeah, Vista, yeah.
And then the last slide, just want to touch on commercial a little bit. So even if you don't own a business or are working in a business or an organization, you still interact with the commercial sector in your daily life as a consumer. And there are things you could do as an employee too. So you can start by sorting your waste correctly in the commercial sector, and then if you are working at that organization, educating your fellow employees, janitorial staff on how to handle that waste properly. There's also a strategy called right-sizing your waste containers at your organization so that you're basically being the most productive with the amount of space and servicing you have for your trash bin. So if you notice that your trash is only getting picked up, it's getting picked up, say 5 times a week, but it's only half full. Are there ways that you can reduce the servicing? Maybe Republic can come 2 or 3 times instead of 5 times. That's fewer trucks on the road, fewer emissions, and more productive and more efficient. You can also conduct a waste audit and set some goals for the organization and encourage your local organizations that are doing really great work to apply for a Curbit award. And then in the best category, preventing that waste in the first place through low waste procurement, or even requesting a Curbit waste evaluation where our team can come in and provide some suggestions on how you can prevent waste or divert more waste. And we can really try to tailor it to your organization's needs.
Are you getting many commercial businesses reaching out for the Curbit evaluation?
Yeah,
And what's usually the wait time before they can?
Great question. We've done about 20 Curbit waste evaluations, everything from Idaho Power to the Boise Farmers Market, local mom and pop coffee shops. We recently did one at BSU, and so we've really seen a swath of different sectors, which is interesting, so that when we go out and do future waste evaluations, we can say, okay, we visited Lost Grove Brewing. We know kind of what a brewery and a restaurant, what their processes look like. So we've done about 20 so far. The turnaround time, or how many we can do, say, in a period of time, it varies just based on our seasonality on our team, but we can generally do about 1 to 2 Curbit waste evaluations per month. And they do take a little bit of time to create and to send back to the organization. But once the organization has that waste evaluation, we're really a resource and an open door. It's not just a, here's your report, we're done. No more suggestions for you. It's really just maintaining that relationship.
When did you start that program, or when was that program started?
In, I believe, 2022. Yeah.
Are these free evaluations, or do commercial companies have to pay?
Yeah. Awesome question. They are free. Yes. Yes. my coworker who leads those evaluations does a really excellent job, and he probably is getting more requests than he can do just by himself. So we're streamlining the process and trying to make it more efficient, but they're really excellent reports and really helpful.
Are you able to go back to the companies at all, just to see what they've implemented, to learn, you know, have lessons learned that you can pass on to other companies, or know what bottlenecks they're facing after the evaluation?
That's a great suggestion. I really like that. We have sent out a survey in the past just to ask how the recommendations are going, which ones they've implemented, which ones they're having a little more trouble with. But we haven't necessarily gone out and done a secondary visit. But I think that's a great suggestion, especially for those businesses that can talk to other businesses within that sector. Yeah, and kind of create that network. Great suggestion. So we ask that you be a Kerbit ambassador and share this information with your friends and neighbors. There are a lot of Kerbit myths out there. There's the orange bag myth, there's Glass Mountain, there are all sorts of Kerbit legends out there. So our team is available to answer questions. We have a really comprehensive website. We're available via email. We're happy to talk with community members at in-person events. We'll be at Earth Day, for example. We're hosting a Repair Cafe in a few weeks, and we would love to talk trash with you, so.
So you guys' tagline, you kind of wore that.
We did that one to the Youth Climate Action Council, and they were just like, that's not funny. So, thank you for laughing at my joke.
Is it a fair statement that for, I guess, multi-family buildings, so like the Arthur building, the new one downtown, or restaurants, like other commercial business, like that recycling is an added expense for them? Like, is there any, I guess, because the city doesn't do that at all, right? It's totally separately handled by the business, is that right?
In terms of what kinds of services they choose to, it is handled by the businesses, yes.
Is there any, so there's nothing in like their permits or like no incentive for a business to, let's say, recycle?
Right, beyond those design standards of at least having the space to house a recycling container, currently no.
Okay.
So yeah, good question.
Feels like a lot of restaurants, for example, you know, it's like quick serve places, just like everything gets tossed.
Yeah.
And if it's an added expense, then it's a tricky, I mean, unless they're just altruistic, like it's a, okay. Feels like there should be an incentive.
Yeah.
Or a penalty for not doing so.
Yeah, definitely. That's something when we're doing our solid waste strategic planning focus groups, where we're asking people about what they would like the future of Boise's waste systems to look like. That's definitely something that's come up, is a sort of pay-as-you-throw type system, or that there should be, it should be more expensive to generate trash than recycling. And some of our rates right now are set up so that recycling is cheaper, but it's not the standard. Yeah. And it's, a lot of our education is geared towards residential, so, yeah.
I used to work with Idaho Power in their energy efficiency department, and something they would do, what you said reminded me of like businesses sharing ideas. They would do like the wastewater plants, they do cohorts where they would try to reduce the energy use. They would have like monthly meetings or whatever. So I don't know if that's something that you could do with businesses, but it might help get the conversation going and track it.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, make connections with each other.
Yeah.
Well, can the city composting program handle, let's say if restaurants really, or restaurants, grocery stores really start putting in their food waste into compost bins and pick them up, can the city handle all that?
So currently, the city does not handle any sort of commercial organic waste, and I think for a few reasons. One, back to the permit, and then also I don't think that we quite have the capacity at our compost facility to handle it at this point. We have the processes, like we could probably handle the types of waste that are coming in, but it's just spacing, staffing.
So right now, there is no restaurants and Fred Meyer's and so on, as they have that type of waste, they don't really have an option for it other than landfill.
There are a few options right now. So a restaurant or any sort of food service industry could contract out with a third-party hauler and composter. So we have a few in Boise right now. We have some information on our commercial page about how businesses can sign up for that, but it is not required and it is not a city-run program. So let's say, a local restaurant, they would need to contact a separate hauler to take their organic waste, and it wouldn't go through the city system. It's a little
We
confusing.
just started organic waste pickup at 2 elementary schools, and we're working with Public Services in Timber Creek, so they're taking all their food waste from the cafeteria. They now have the curbside bins and it's getting picked up. So there are a few examples of it happening, it's just not a city program.
Well, and like on 8th Street, they have like a worm farm in the basement, and so it's like, how do we, like, we should write letters to our favorite restaurants, so they all have worm farms.
Yeah, totally. Nice. Yeah, that is an area we want to see more commercial composting for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me talk on and on.
We do have an activity. I'm gonna let Danny present first, and then we'll kind of leave the activity just because I want to make sure we get through natural environment as well. And then we have a key takeaway that I want to make sure that we get to as well. So Danny, I can give you the quick wrap here.
Okay.
So I know it's a big shift, but I'm gonna ask everybody to take off their sort of mitigation hat and put on their adaptation hat, because that's kind of where we're switching to for the next sections that we'll be talking about. And to kick that off, we have natural environment. In 2016, the city did this big climate adaptation assessment. So in that, they identified 8 key priorities of areas where the city would need to pay special attention to these sort of natural environment areas of interest, because those would pose the greatest sort of threat to people and property in Boise over the next 60 years. Most of those were water-based things, like heavy precipitation events, river flooding events, those types of things, droughts as well, focused on those. The other 2 big categories that came up there were heat and air quality. Now we have a whole water section coming up, so I'm going to be focusing most of this natural environment section on heat and air quality, but obviously they're also interconnected, that I will be focusing a little bit on drought and water as well. So that's just sort of setting the scope for this, but yeah, and ask questions as they come up throughout the presentation. So setting the stage for this on the heat side, this is a graph that I put together quickly, but this is just aggregate data, and it's the number of days per year that we hit over 100 degrees. So over here on the left-hand side is the number of days that were over 100 degrees, and you can see a clear trend. So going up since they started collecting data back in the 1970s, and it's not just the number of days in the summer that are over 100 degrees. Like back in the these days where we had like less than 5 days over 100 degrees, you can expect those to probably be dispersed. Those were typically dispersed throughout the summer. We're now having longer stretches of time that are over 100 degrees during the day. That means that it's also staying warmer during the nighttime temperatures as well. And it's just generally more difficult for people to remove themselves from that heat, right? Especially if they're in a population where it's difficult to get into air conditioning or find shelter, or unhoused populations, or maybe folks who either don't have air conditioning or don't have the money to fix an air conditioning unit, or have subpar air conditioning, that sort of thing. So that's really, the threat from a human standpoint of this increasing heat. And along with this, right, we have exacerbation effects with air quality, and also hotter, drier temperatures means more water evaporation. I don't have to spell it out for everybody. I think that it's pretty evident. But what might not be evident, and the reason I sent out the map the canopy map beforehand, is because this heat isn't experienced uniformly across Boise, right? And this is true for almost every city, but there are microclimates, right, throughout the urban environment where you might experience more heat or less heat. So you can see, do I have to? I do, okay. These, like in the north end, are most densely treed neighborhoods. Parts of the bench are very, very well canopied and have lots of green space. You can see these pockets where the heat is less severe, whereas our very urban, throughout downtown and into Garden City especially, these corridors along Fairview and Federal Way, the freeway, are all these areas, urban heat islands, right? Where lack of green space, a lot of reflective materials, things like that all work together to create a very hot environment. And the difference between these areas can be really striking. It can be like 20 degrees of experienced heat, so somebody living in Garden City is going to experience an entirely different summer, right, than somebody living in North End or the Bench. So that's worth pointing out here. And then, like I spoke a little bit about this exacerbating effect with air quality as well. So we have increasing vehicular traffic in Boise, meaning more emissions from exhaust. Wildfires, more severe wildfires, creating more smoke in our urban environments, and also hotter, drier temperatures, creating more dust as well. So just more particulate matter in the air. That not only those sorts of effects not only cause health effects on their own, but can exacerbate existing conditions that people have, right, as well. So this is, it's not as striking if you plot it out as heat of days over 100 AQI, so air quality index is how we measure air quality. It measures a bunch of different pollutants from nitrous oxide and ozone and particulate matter and a few others. But they combine it all into this thing called AQI. And the yellow is moderate AQI, so this is where it's probably, the yellow patches are where it's probably healthy. So each of these is a year, and every line is a day in the year. So you can see these stretches of good air quality in the yellow, and then the green. I'm sorry, I'm colorblind. If I get any of the colors mixed up, just bear with me. The green is unhealthy, or this color is unhealthy, and then the red and the blue are more unhealthy and very unhealthy. But you can see these sort of increasing numbers of red and blue days. Last year was especially bad, so we broke all the wrong records in all the wrong ways. Last year we had 69 days, I think, of unhealthy air quality conditions over 2024, and 26 of those days were in the very unhealthy category. That's like, I think, over half. I might not get this right. I think it's over half of the days that they've even had in that category since we started monitoring in 1988. Since the EPA started monitoring in 1988. So that's sort of just setting the stage for the issues that we're trying to combat within the natural environment on heat and air quality. And when we think about what we can do on a local level to adapt to this changing climate that we're in, right? We have to think about land use around Boise. So this map has sort of broad strokes land ownership across the Boise area of impact. So this is the Boise AOI, not just Boise city limits. But you can see, there are large, what is the airport, large swaths of city-owned land. There's a lot of school-owned land in there, federal, states mixed in there as well. So, some of this work can be done by large institutions, but the overwhelming majority of land in Boise is privately owned. So privately owned and developed, I should say, as well. So that has to be part of the conversation when we're talking about, what we can do on land in Boise. It has to come from private sector primarily. There's only so much that can be done on publicly owned land. But as far as how we treat our land in order to combat the heat and air quality issues, it comes down a lot to the choices that we make with that land use. And by that I'm mostly talking about preservation and creation of more green space in our urban environment. There's a lot to be said for increasing the amount of biodiversity we have in our green spaces, but really what it comes down to is creating more green space to provide all the benefits that green space gives us, right? That's heat mitigation from our canopy, or even just from any green space due to the evaporative cooling that we get from it. But heat mitigation, air filtration that those plants provide, those green spaces provide, water filtration, as well as water retention to reduce storm water load on our stormwater system. And then more, human effects of increase. There's been studies that have shown increased community cohesion with greater, in neighborhoods with greater amounts of green space. Presumably just because it's easier for people to be outside and comfortable outside their homes in those spaces. There's been studies that show, areas with higher tree canopy and higher green space, people have higher life expectancies even. If anybody's familiar with the biodiversity hypothesis, this is sort of an idea that's been cropping up over the last, I'm not sure how many years, but that's, biodiversity in general is healthier for people. It affects the human microbiome and creates just a healthier environment for people to especially grow up in. So a ton of study. I'm the father of 2 young boys now, and so you see all this parenting advice that children are healthier if they have a dog in the household, or if they have an older sibling, or if they spend more time outside. That's all just because they live in these environments where they're just exposed to more stuff, and they have a more robust and healthy immune system, things like that. But those are all kind of the just innate benefits that this green space can offer us, in addition to helping mitigate heat and air quality. Another big piece of this is obviously our recreation as well. I think most people are familiar with this. We interact with the natural environment in so many ways. It's so innate to us that it's easy to think of it as this like nebulous concept, but we also interact with it very pointedly to recreate with it, right? So we have our yards, our public spaces like our sports complexes, our pools, our courts, those types of things. One of the most unique things that Boise has going for it is the huge trail system that we have in Boise on our foothills land. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, working for Parks and Recreation. It's just a really cool thing. I thought it was really cool when I first moved to Boise that we had so much protected public space devoted just to recreation and in the foothills. So we have over 200 miles of trail in the Ridge to Rivers system. This is all collaboratively managed across the Boise foothills. And also, obviously we have a green belt and a few other Oregon Trail and stuff interspersed throughout the city as well. This is the proportion that is managed by the city. I just thought that was interesting as well. I just filtered for that when I was putting this together. But a large portion of it is owned and managed by the city as well. So that's all from levy dollars. That's all very protected. Some of the other trails in the system are on a public-private partnership. So those, aren't as protected as others. But yeah, it's a huge win for conservation in Boise. So going back to the model that we've been using, this sort of good, better, best, I hesitated to put it into this. I just stuck with it for clarity, but I think all of these are important, honestly. But in the good category, I put just being aware of the benefits that green space and biodiversity offer us in Boise. I think that's just a critical first step, right? I think that there's just I talk to people every day and working for Boise Parks and Recreation and in my conservation efforts as well, who just don't have, it's not part of their daily thought process, right? The natural environment just doesn't come up in there. It's not in their wheelhouse, whatever the case may be. It's just not something to think about a lot. But being aware that the choices that are made on land that you either own or that you live around or things like that have a definite effect on the place that you live. So that's step number one. That's just critical to everything that comes next. Being a good steward of the natural areas that you do interact with. So again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our interactive trail map. I don't have a link to it here, but we have a really cool interactive trail map that shows trail closures. This is especially important during the wet part of the season. So on the Ridge to River system, A huge amount of damage is done to the trails by people using muddy trails or letting their dogs run on muddy trails. Another really critical piece of our natural environment is the riparian areas. So that's another area that's very fragile, right, to human and animal incursion. So being aware of those spaces and protecting those spaces when you are using it, put that in a good category. There's so many volunteer efforts. So if you want to go out there and get your hands dirty, there's a ton of volunteer. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir among this group, but there's a ton of volunteer opportunities, not just with the city. So we have like our pollinator posse, our weed warriors, a bunch of other volunteer opportunities from the city, but there's also the Golden Eagle Audubon Society, BRIN, the Boise River Enhancement Network, has a ton of volunteer opportunities. Others, but there's a ton. This one that I just have.
Are you thinking Nature Conservancy?
The Nature Conservancy.
They're doing
That was
some
who I was,
big
yeah, absolutely.
programs, like in the burn scars and stuff.
Right,
That's going on.
yeah, totally.
It can be asynchronous as well.
What was that?
It could be asynchronous as well. I mean, if you see a, skeleton weed or a go-ahead, you can.
Oh, yeah.
If you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Check your shoes
Yeah.
for nutlets and dispose of them.
Right, yeah.
Pick up mine for trash.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that goes back as well to just being a good steward of the environment as well. But yeah, you can think about that as volunteer work as well. Just doing what you can with the time you have in the spaces, in the natural spaces that you're a part of. Advocacy, we've been putting this on a lot, but it really is important. Attending Parks and Rec Commission meetings, attending Planning and Zoning Commission meetings is huge. Working within your means at the state and federal levels even, because as we've all seen, a lot of federal decisions have significant impacts on the work that we can do here in Boise. Best, I put this in the best category, but it's just because it takes the highest sort of like level of resources and efforts. It's not necessarily the most impactful. Maybe the most impactful is advocacy, but doing something different with the space that you own or control or interact with, right? So planting large deciduous shade trees is huge. These, especially, bonus points that they're planted on the southern or western aspects of your home, that's where you'll get the most sort of environmental service benefits for your buck, so to say. Because they'll shade your home in the summertime from the heat and then allow sunlight in the winter time. And incorporating more native and low water landscaping into your environments as well. This is hugely important for native pollinators, having those like dispersed pockets of habitat that they can rely on is huge for them, and it's huge for us as well. I've talked about the biodiversity hypothesis, but having that biodiversity around us will benefit everybody. So, any questions before we move on?
Are there any specific initiatives to try to address those on that canopy map you showed us in those areas that are not good?
Absolutely. So we have the City Tree Challenge, which was started in 2020 by then Council President Lane Clay. But that's our effort to work within those communities that need trees the most. So it is focused just on trees. But the goal essentially is to add, well, there's a number to it, add 100,000 trees to Boise by 2030. That would roughly double our canopy if we had that many trees. So you can think about it as doubling the canopy in Boise by 2030. So that's the goal of the City of Trees Challenge. There aren't any just sort of vegetative programs. I do always bring it up. I've been bringing it up in the community conversations. Nampa just implemented a program where they incentivize changing over to low water landscaping in your yards, and I want to just keep bringing it up. It's a similar program. I think it's great. So yeah, but it is happening. It is happening around the valley. We were just gearing up. Emma is with the Trench Valley Camping Network, our primary partner for the City of Trees Challenge. But we were just gearing up to expand the City of Trees Challenge sort of westward into Meridian and Caldwell. But things, so, you know. I won't right now. That we put those plans on hold for now, but yeah, we do still have that. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, I have about 2 slides left, and then we'll use the remainder of the time for the activity, so that I will end us on time, and then we'll ask you to stick around and do one final activity, and then we'll have a follow-up as well, like I always do with our meeting minutes. This will be recorded, and then I think Danny will have kind of an ask as well that we'll follow up on, so our next meeting will focus on water and food systems. It will be May 12th, a month basically from now, again at the library at Cole and Ustick. So we're kind of moving around as we're trying to find locations around the city that work. Any questions about our next meeting? Cool. That will be that kind of gets us through the 6 out of 7 priority areas. One that's innovation engagement that we don't necessarily have slotted to discuss. What we're doing right now is kind of innovation engagement. We will have a recap of our community engagement. That includes our survey, what we've heard from you all, and then also what we've heard from the community. And then our June meeting will really be focused on, okay, here's what we've heard. Now where do we go from here, and start kind of thinking of like what our final deliverable will look like. So that's just kind of the next 2 months mapped out, and then we'll go from there based on what we hear from you. So I'm going to kick it over to Catherine, and she'll walk us through the activity, and then we'll get you on your way out of here.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And I have pens too, if everybody doesn't have any pens.
All right, we're going to do a little mini waste audit. Not gonna make you all go so far as to dumpster dive today. If you want to at home, you're more than welcome to. It's a fun, in my opinion, it's a fun exercise. But basically, this activity, the goal is to help you reflect on the items that you commonly use in your daily life and think about the climate impacts of those items. See if there are opportunities to make more sustainable choices around the materials that you use every day. And then something that we really want to hear from you all is, what are those barriers that you all face to swapping an item or making more sustainable choices? The instructions are on the back, but I'll do a quick example for you just so we can walk through it together. So step 1 is to identify your daily items. So for example, I will use clothing every day. I will use this shirt as an example. So in your daily item category, you would put shirt. In the item origin category, I would like you to think about where that item comes from. Not just like, oh, I got this shirt at Kohl's, but where is that item being produced? What types of transportation did it take to get to the store? What types of energy, resources go into the use of that product? Was it purchased in store or online? Just thinking a little bit, thinking critically about all the stages of that life cycle up until the point that you are starting to use that item. And then think about how you would dispose that item. So I might donate this shirt after I'm done with it, or I unfortunately might put it in the landfill if I'm not being as intentional. Next, think about if there are ways or alternatives that you can use to disposing of that item. So, or of even consuming that item in the first place. So this shirt, for example, from Kohl's is made out of polyester. Could I have purchased a shirt that was made out of recycled polyester instead? Could I have purchased a secondhand shirt instead? Could I have borrowed one from my sister's closet? All sorts of different ways that we can think about alternatives to our daily items, and then list out the challenges. Why is it difficult to make that swap from using your current item to something that's more sustainable? So for example, I would love to be able to repair my clothing, but I have no sewing skills whatsoever. So that's my challenge there, is I have a knowledge gap, but thankfully I can take it to the repair cafe and it can be fixed there. Or I could think about, you know, it's more cost effective for me to buy something at Kohl's maybe than to buy from a local vendor, but maybe not. So just think about what the challenges are to making more sustainable materials management choices. We have, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 daily items listed here. So just think of things that you use on a daily basis. And if you have any questions, feel free to pose them, raise your hand.
And I'm sure that you can get through 6 items.
And we're collecting these.
Yes, yep. You don't have to put your name on it. That's okay. You can be anonymous.
And it is totally okay if you don't know exactly where the item comes from, for example. I was lucky because on my shirt tag, it said made in Indonesia, for example. But if you don't know exactly where it comes from, write that down. in the item origin. Maybe that's one of the challenges. We don't know what is used to produce that certain